Developing film at home is a great way to explore the medium of film and to really understand the process that's involved in creating the image that you've taken. Even if you're a beginner, it's really easy to kind of get into film developing because there are so many different developing kits available from a bunch of different companies so that you can develop black and white negative, black and white reversal, color negative, and color reversal film all on your own. I've previously covered developing tutorials on the channel for black and white negative, color negative, and even black and white reversal developing yourself. I'm going to get around to color reversal at some point. One of the biggest aspects of developing film is precise temperature control of the chemicals that you're using. Especially with color developing, the temperature of your chemicals is integral for proper results. So today I'm doing a little review on the temperature control system from Cinestill, a device that helps you to heat and maintain the water temperature when you're developing. Cinestill, of course, puts out their films 800T, 50D, and black and white XX, all of which are rebranded Kodak Cinema film stocks, but they're also a big part of supplying chemicals and gear for the home developing crowd. I'm going to walk through the features of the TCS, how it works in the development workflow, and also some alternatives that are cheaper if you don't want to shell out for this, or some more expensive options if you want to shell out for something even bigger. The Cinestill temperature control system comes with a small instruction sheet, the optional bottle holder attachment, and then the unit itself packed in styrofoam. The TCS has a power cable at the back, a clip for attaching it to a container, and then the controls and display screen at the very top. For just this example, I'm going to use a mop bucket, which is a little bit small, but it's a good depth for the unit. There's a minimum and maximum water line on the TCS that your water level needs to be in the middle of once you have everything in the container. I'm not developing for real here, I'm just doing a little bit of a mock development walkthrough using some black and white chemicals that I already have mixed that I'll be bringing to my selected temperature. We have three controls on the unit: the power button, the CS button, and the adjustment wheel below the control panel. To turn it on, we just press the power button for a couple of seconds and the display comes to life. You also turn it off in the same way. On the display, we have the current water temperature displayed in the middle, our desired water temperature that we set in the top right, and then two timers for our development cycle on the bottom left and bottom right. You set the temperature using the little wheel on the unit, and for this, I'll bring my chemicals to the temperature for C41 developing, which is 39 degrees Celsius or 102 degrees Fahrenheit. The chemicals in the jugs will be a little bit cooler than the actual water temperature, so you want to up your temperature just a bit. Press the power button and the unit turns on and begins heating and circulating the water. The circulation function of the unit also makes it possible to use it for mixing chemicals when you buy a kit initially. The TCS is only a heater and does not allow you to also lower the temperature of your water if it becomes too warm. You can set a lower temperature, but that just lowers the temperature of the heater, and you'll need to wait for the water to drop to that temperature on its own. It's also good to have a little thermometer to use with the chemicals to make sure that they're at the proper temperature. To set the timers, press the CS button and adjust the time using the wheel. The timers default to 3.5 minutes, which is the C41 development duration, and 8 minutes, which is the duration for the C41 Blix step. Pressing the CS button will cycle through the timers to allow for setting either minutes or seconds. For this example, the unit brought the water from 23 degrees Celsius up to 40 degrees Celsius in under 10 minutes, and the chemicals themselves took just a bit longer than that to achieve the appropriate temperature. I'll fill up a developing tank now that my chemicals have hit their appropriate temperature and monitor it during the 3 minutes to make sure the temperature remains consistent. The chemical that's in use can be shuffled out of the water bath, and I can keep the developing tank in its place so that the temperature in the tank remains the same. 3.5 minutes is pretty short, so there's not much risk of the temperature changing much, and it does stay the same in the water with the TCS running. At the end of the first timer, a long beep will signal you to pour out the developer, run your rinse or stop bath, and then after 30 seconds the unit will beep 4 times and the second timer will automatically start. The Blix step in C41 processing is less reliant on super precise temperature, so you don't have to worry as long as you just leave the tank in the water with the TCS running. Keeping an eye on my secondary thermometer shows that the unit is running accurately and everything has remained consistent throughout the duration of the timers. You can also easily pause or adjust your timers during the process by pressing either of the buttons, which will cause the display to flash, and then pressing the CS button allows you to resume. Switching between Celsius and Fahrenheit can also be done by pressing the power and CS buttons at the same time. Be sure that you have an appropriate amount of water in your container as well. If the water level drops below the minimum line on the unit, then it will automatically turn off and start beeping. The TCS feels very solid. The interface is also super easy to use and control when you're in the middle of developing. And really importantly, it works well in bringing the water to the correct temperature that you set. And in my experience, the unit keeps that temperature consistent as well. It's also pretty large, which might throw people off. And I don't know if maybe this is just me, but I was kind of expecting it to be a little bit smaller until I actually took it out of the box. It needs to sit a little bit off the bottom of whatever water container you're using. I used a mop bucket as my example here, but you'll likely want to find a larger container that works for its size and also allows you to hold maybe an extra jug of chemicals and probably also your developing tank as you shuffle things around. Really, it's just best, of course, to test it out before you immediately use it in a development run with your valuable film, because it can just kind of be a little awkward on setup. I haven't mixed chemicals with it, but the circulation function works very well from what I've seen, so it does make mixing from powder or liquid chemical kits really easy. Cinestill recommends their 1 liter mixing jug, but any jug or container that's about that size will be fine for holding the unit. The universal bottle holder attachment I don't find super necessary. It's fine, it works really well with these accordion style jugs that Cinestill themselves sells, which are fine, but they're also a pain to clean properly, so I don't always recommend these to people. But it won't actually hold a Patterson developing tank, which kind of seems like a missed opportunity. Trying to find a good water level for the unit and your jugs, and then also keep a Patterson tank in there to maintain your temperature, might result in the Patterson tank having a little bit of a float going on, especially if it's one of the smaller developing tanks. So allowing for the tank to be held in place by the TCS would be pretty nice, but it just doesn't seem to fit. The TCS is available from Cinestill's site for $100 USD. I personally got mine from Downtown Camera here in Toronto for about 150 Canadian, so I didn't have to pay shipping and worry about the exchange rate. So it's really not a bad price for how solid it is. But it's in no way a necessity for developing, and there are definitely alternatives to it, mainly a sous vide cooker, which is definitely what the TCS kind of is. Sous vide cookers are of course just meant specifically for preparing food, but if you're using one that is coming into contact with film developing chemicals, then maybe just don't use it also for food. Innova has the Precision Cooker Nano, which is maybe a better size for people. I've always kind of liked the look of that one, but it's also much more expensive than the Cinestill unit, so maybe just not worth considering. The one that draws the biggest comparison to the TCS is probably the iCock SV8001 sous vide cooker, mostly because it looks identical to the Cinestill one. Now, I've read other reviews about the TCS, and people have said that Cinestill claims they've completely designed theirs. It has a different heating element and is more precise for temperatures under 45 degrees Celsius. But the 8001 does look a lot like the TCS. The screen, the buttons, the main part of the unit, everything pretty much minus the Cinestill branding. Maybe the internals between this and a sous vide cooker are kind of different. It's a little hard to know. Cinestill might just be making some bold claims there. This SV8001 doesn't seem to be easily available these days though, but you can probably track one down for about $50. And I've read lots of people having a fine experience with just using any sous vide cooker in place of the TCS, really. I've also seen people use fish tank heaters during developing, but those aren't necessarily as easy or reliable to use as a unit like this is. Or simply just bring your stuff up to the proper temperature in a pot of water on the stove. Really, it kind of depends on what your budget is and how easy you're looking to make this process for yourself. I personally have been using this more expensive heated water bath unit from Flick Film. It's not a huge container, but it's super consistent and easy to use. There's a heated element in the bottom that maintains the temperature really consistently in my experience. I really like the Flick Film water bath. I find it works really well, especially with smaller developing runs, and it's also definitely kind of less awkward to set up in comparison to the TCS, but it is more on the side of $200 usually, so it's not going to be for everyone. And if you're looking to get really high end with precision temperature control while developing, you can look into Jobo developing units, but those are gonna run you $1,000 or more typically. So that's on the much kind of higher end scale of things. I'll give the Cinestill TCS my thumbs up. It works well. It makes developing a little bit easier, which is exactly its purpose. I can't say for sure it's not just a rip-off of a somewhat cheaper sous vide cooker, so maybe a little bit less of a thumbs up. There's no problem with cheaper or DIY solutions, and for a lot of people, those work really well, and it's definitely the route to go. But if you have the budget and you're looking for something to make developing a little bit easier, then this is a very good choice. Thank you so much for checking this out. There are links in the description below for the Cinestill unit through Downtown Camera here in Toronto, which is where I personally picked it up. Also, some opportunities for you to become a proud supporter of Analog Resurgence. There's a Patreon. There's also merch available if you're interested in that at all. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you soon. One last thing I want to show off in this video, I received a package to the P.O. Box address, which you can find down in the description below if you have interesting stuff that you want to send along. As always, it's always super appreciated. Dawn sent me a 9.5mm wind-up movie camera that was made in France in like the 1920s. So this camera is probably about 100 years old. I've done a little video on 9.5mm film before. It was a movie format that was primarily popular in Europe in like the 20s, 30s, and 40s. It just didn't have the ability to beat out the popularity of 8mm and 16mm from Kodak. But there were a lot of people who were shooting 9.5mm around that time. It's an odd little film format that has a perforation in the middle of the film. It's just a wind-up camera where you wind the crank on the side, and it moves the motor. It's so cool to actually have one of these in hand. They would take these little metal cassettes that had the film in it that would run it through. They're very bare bones, but 100 years later, one of these has made its way into my hands. Unfortunately, I don't believe that there is anybody currently putting out 9.5mm fresh cut perforated film. I believe there have been efforts to do so in the last number of years, but I'm not sure that any like small group of enthusiasts have managed to make that available again. But this thing still runs, at least in some capacity, so that's very, very cool. Thank you so much, Dawn.